And Chris, what about yourself? Kind of what is your sense on the ground? Are there opportunities being missed in Quebec, not just by the pro-life movement, perhaps by some major political parties as well?
Well, I think there are some opportunities, but you have to make the right distinctions first and foremost. Are you talking about the pro-life movement? Are you talking about certain political parties, the Conservative Party in my instance? And also, I think you have to keep your expectations in the right realm.
What does a winning Quebec platform look like for Conservative parties without costing seats in other parts of the country?
Well, first and foremost, respecting provincial jurisdiction. Decentralization, subsidiarity, these are Conservative principles, and they're principles that are very near and dear to Quebecers. So that has to be at the heart of any Conservative approach to Quebec.
Welcome to Right Now and CCBR's live election special.
Bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Catherine Mongenet et je suis la directrice régionale de Right Now pour le Québec et pour le Canada Atlantique. Comme nous venons de le voir, il y a non seulement des candidats pro-vie qui se présentent aux élections au Québec, mais en plus, le Québec a plus d'électeurs pro-vie que ce que montrent les médias et les partis politiques. Pour cette table ronde, je suis heureuse d'être accompagnée de mon collègue Scott Hayward et de Christopher Mahon, un ancien membre du personnel conservateur haut placé, pour parler un peu plus de cette question. For our Anglophones viewers, my name is Catherine Mongenet, and I am Right Now's Regional Director for Quebec and Atlantic Canada. As we just saw, not only are there social conservative candidates running in this election in Quebec, but Quebec has more social conservative voters than the media and the political parties let on. I'm happy to be joined for this panel discussion by my colleague, Scott Hayward, and former Conservative senior staffer, Chris Mahon. So I'm happy that we're going to be able to talk a little bit more about this issue. Scott, you hired me because you told me that you felt that the social fabric of Quebec isn't currently well represented by the media and everything. Why do you think that's the case?
That's a very good question, Catherine. I'm so happy that you're able to join us this evening, as well as Chris. They'll be part of our panel discussions 2 more later this evening. And so Catherine's absolutely right. And one of my first experiences was a few years ago. I went on pilgrimage through Quebec, through rural Quebec. We started at Saint-Joseph-la-Nard, and then went along the Chemin de Bois, which is the oldest highway in North America, on the north shore of the St. Lawrence, all the way to Trois-Rivières, where we ended the pilgrimage over a couple of days. And during that time, we're in the heart of rural Quebec, right? So we're going through places like Berthierville, Maskinongé. These are a lot of bloc seats at this particular point in time. Berthier-Maskinongé used to be NDP with Ruthel and Berceau. But what I noticed is, as we're going along the Chemin de Bois, there's about 100 of us or so, and we're all, praying and chanting in French and English and Latin. We have crucifixes or whatever. It's quite obvious what we're doing. And along the way, along the shore, you have all these beautiful little small homes in rural Quebec, and out will come these women in their 50s and 60s. And I don't mean to completely judge a book by its cover, but they got the dyed purple hair or whatever, and they're coming out, and they probably haven't been to Mass in years, if not decades, for probably the most part. And yet they're there, and they're not screaming at us or anything like that, but they're observing us, and a few of them had tears in their eyes. And so it made me think that, is there this nostalgia in rural Quebec, in the regions, to something that they used to have, maybe something they had a taste of as a child that was taken away from them, and then when they see it and they're confronted by the beauty, now I'm talking about religion, of course, and not pro-life issues, which aren't necessarily one and the same. But I guess my question to you two, having been involved in national campaigns and gone through the province, and of course, Catherine, yourself being a Francophone, is there something more in Quebec that the pro-life movement could tap into? Are there opportunities? And if they exist, what are they, and how can we capitalize upon them?
Yeah, for sure. So for myself, I think that for the candidate that I've interviewed so far, for sure, they're very pro-life, they're strong, they're solid in their beliefs, and I think that the media is so focused on portraying Quebec as being far left or not sharing our ideals that it's easy to imagine that Quebec doesn't have that population that relates to our belief, but they're there, and I think we just have to find it, do a lot more of groundwork over there. But for sure, I think there's a lot of opportunity to be explored there. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing on the ground, yeah.
And Chris, what about yourself? I mean, you've been part of, OLOs and national leadership tours and things of this nature. I mean, you used to work for various ministers of the Crown for a number of years. You've gone through Quebec. You've seen this issue. You've heard about it in Ottawa. Kind of what is your sense on the ground? Are there opportunities being missed in Quebec, not just by the pro-life movement, perhaps by some major political parties as well?
Well, I think there are some opportunities, but you have to make the right distinctions first and foremost. Are you talking about the pro-life movement? Are you talking about certain political parties, the Conservative Party in my instance? And also, I think you have to keep your expectations in the right realm. Quebec sometimes can be caricatured as a monolithic culture, and it is very much not. There is a very rich culture, a very rich history in Quebec. There is diversity as well, especially in different parts of Quebec. And it's very important to keep in mind what your real objective is. So for the movement, for example, of course, there's a lot of networking, there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of recruitment. There are people there who want to give to the movement. On a partisan level, for the Conservative Party, certainly there are some electoral opportunities. Stephen Harper won between 5 and 10 seats each election, which has been fairly consistent for a generation now. But it's important also on a partisan level not to set the wrong objective. We are not going to see a Mulroney-style sweep in Quebec again for the Conservative Party. In 1984, I think Mulroney won 58 seats, and that was part of the largest majority in the history of Canada. And then in the very next election, he increased his seat total in Quebec, I think, to 63. The Conservative Party of Canada is not going to replicate that. And we make a fatal error, certainly as a party, if we start tempting ourselves into thinking that we're going to do that. And it does affect our outreach in other parts of the country as well.
Yeah, and I kind of want to tap into that vein. So for both of you, what does a winning Quebec platform look like for Conservative parties without costing seats in other parts of the country?
Well, first and foremost, respecting provincial jurisdiction. Decentralization, subsidiarity, these are Conservative principles, and they're principles that are very near and dear to Quebecers. So that has to be at the heart of any Conservative approach to Quebec electorally. There are other things that you can do. Stephen Harper, I thought it was a very effective thing to do. He began every set of public remarks in French, and it was a sign of respect to the founding language, if you will, of Canada. There are other policies that can really appeal to Quebec voters that don't in any way undermine partisan interests in the rest of the country. For example, the single tax return, which was a policy that Andrew Scheer promoted in our platform in 2019, and that Aaron O'Toole has included in his contract with Quebecers in this election. So there are things that the Conservative Party can do, and also the pro-life movement too, that will bear fruit in Quebec and won't inhibit our outreach efforts in other parts of the country.
And Catherine, what about yourself? Like for this question, what is your thoughts on a platform where you can win in other parts of the country, but you can still maintain a bit of a beachhead, if you will, within Quebec?
Well, for myself, I think I'm more of a communications person than a policy person, and I think that plays a big role in elections, especially in Quebec. And maybe, I don't know if maybe that's just my impression, but for instance, I know last elections, a lot of Anglophones were perhaps shocked maybe that the Bloc did so well, and it didn't come as such a surprise to me because I noticed that a lot of Francophones around me were super impressed with Blanchette, and it wasn't necessarily because of what he said, it was about how he said it, and he presented himself as a leader, and he sounded like really sure about what he was saying, and I think oftentimes leaders from various political parties can perhaps sound like they're talking to Quebec as like they're almost like an alien nation, like, oh, what are we going to say to Quebec? And I think that as soon as you talk to them as like with respect, as equals, no matter what your ideas are, as long as you're convincing and you're passionate about what you're saying and you're sincere, I think that makes a huge impact. That's already half the battle.
There were two important lessons, I think, of the 2011 election campaign. And I don't think they've been fully absorbed by the party yet. One of which is that in the last generation, we tend to get between 5 and 10 seats in Quebec. but we cannot win a majority without the 905. And that's something that Stephen Harper did in 2011. We won a majority of 11 seats, I believe, with 5 seats in Quebec. So even if we had won 0 seats in Quebec, we still would have had a healthy majority. And that's the only majority we've won since 1988. The other lesson from 2011, and again, shifting your focus in that way changes how you talk about things, it changes the issues you're addressing. The other lesson from 2011 is that there are things that you can offer the Canadian electorate that might be termed pro-life that are consensus respecting. And in Prime Minister Harper's years prior to 2011, in his term prior to 2011, we implemented the maternal and child health care policy with an explicit commitment not to fund abortion in our foreign aid. And in the very next election, we won a majority. We've shied away from that in other campaigns in the last few years, and you know, we see the results. That doesn't mean that if you promise not to fund abortion in your foreign aid, you're automatically going to win a majority. But the 2011 election campaign does illustrate that you can do some things in a sophisticated way and still win, and win big as we did in 2011.